So today we are going to talk about how to upgrade a CPU for a Lenovo M700 mini PC. I have purchased the replacement CPU from eBay. Um, as you can probably now be able to see in clear view, this is an i7 6700T. Now T is for low power consumption. Um, in order to replace the CPU, you need to remove the cover. And to remove the cover, you need to remove the screw in the back. As you can see here, this device is originally equipped with an i3 processor, i3, I believe 6100T to be precise. Once the cover is open, you can leave it on the side. You can put the screws or whatever parts you take out in there. What you see on top is the tray for SATA drive, which we're not going to remove. And the bottom, you have a fan and the heatsink. So this is the part where we're going to remove and to be able to replace the CPU. There are three screws that are holding the fan piece on top of the heatsink. Um, yeah, like I said, three screws. These three screws need to be removed. Actually, no, not removed. They kind of stay on the fan. So there's a couple things you can do. There's a connector. You can unplug it if you want. I didn't see the need for it. Now you are going to remove the four screws that's holding the heatsink onto the motherboard. The way that I normally do it is I do sort of a crisscross uh, direction, very similar to how you would install this heatsink. So what I've done here is I found a brush. The grill that's where the fan is blowing into was a little dirty, so I was just taking the time to make sure it's clean. Like I said, unscrewing this in a kind of a crisscross direction. In this case, I kind of went all the way around, but as you can see later on, I think I did end up doing the crisscross. So I end up doing 2 or 3 turns per screw. So this will allow me to evenly lift the heatsink. So once the screws is completely removed from the motherboard fastener, you can slowly shimmy that heatsink out. And again, there's a sensor on it, so if you want, you can unplug it, but in my case, I did not. As you can see there, that's the connector. So what we're going to do now is remove the CPU and then start cleaning the heatsink. So this CPU, again, is an i3 6100T, 2-core. I believe it can have up to 4 threads, but in reality, the 2-core 4 thread, even with 4 threads, is very slow. So rubbing alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, just kind of going to end up um, cleaning the back of the heatsink. Um, there's really no need to actually clean the other processors, since I'm not really going to be using it. I think I eventually clean it anyways. Isopropyl alcohol would end up removing, uh, thermal grease, or if there's any kind of oil that's on the surface. So we'll definitely keep it clean. So end up cleaning this a couple times, making sure that it is spotless. Um, yeah, so now it's using a dry one to make sure it's dry. Now here comes the new processor. I end up doing the same thing, clean up the top, the lid of the CPU or heat spreader of the CPU. Just make sure there's no grease, oil on the surface. So when I apply the thermal grease or thermal compound, it's going to have good heat transfer. So make sure it's clean. And then putting the CPU back in its socket. So there are 2 notches here. This is where you can line up with the socket. It only goes in one way, so pretty hard to mess this up. But do be careful, don't bend any pins underneath it. So, and then make sure the bracket is locked, and then reverse the process. Actually, no, before you reverse the process, apply thermal compound. I'm kind of an old school guy, so instead of just leaving it there, I ended up spreading it. My favorite tool is a expired credit card with a cut up edge, so that I can just spread it pretty easily. I think this compound a little thick, so it took a little while to fully spread on top of the processor. But what I normally do is I want to make sure that every single um, every every part of the top of the processor is covered with thermal compound, so that when the heatsink gets pressed onto it, there are no gaps, no um, um, air pockets. So again, to promote better heat transfer. So yeah, so once that's on there, you can just flip the heatsink back. Now that this part goes in first. It took a little while to take it out, but just make sure you put it back in carefully and make sure that the bottom of the heatsink does not touch the CPU just yet. So shimmy that back in. Now you put it down properly, make sure the cables are not jammed underneath anywhere. Like I was just trying to figure out if the cable was caught on something. There is a slot, so I wasn't sure if that was supposed to go in there or not. So anyways, I ended up just making sure that it didn't, nothing was sitting on top of it. So now you go back and screw the screws back on. As you can see, this is a crisscross direction. So diagonally, so you do a couple turns here, and then on the other side, opposite side, do another couple turns here. So eventually, the screws will stop turning. That is the maximum amount of force that the heatsink will have on top of the CPU. And then just double checking the CPU, the cable, make sure that the sensor has the right, or it's not being caught or cut up by anything. And then the fin supposed to go back in, and that ended up being a little dirty as well. So just making sure that the fins are clean. What you see here on the bottom of the fan is because my hand has some thermal compound on my finger, so that is just kind of left at the bottom. It didn't really make any difference. So okay, so 3 screws back in. I don't think that this part really matters which directions you go. Just make sure those all 3 screws are going in and make sure they're tight. This is really just blown air through the fins from the heatsink. So, and again, this is another reason that I didn't actually unplug the cables. So it feels like unplugging cables is sort of an unnecessary action task that I didn't want to go through. So, so yeah, clean up the fins and then put the cover back on. Yeah, make sure that the cables for the Wi-Fi antenna are not disconnected. And then the cover goes back in. Screws goes back in. And then we're gonna turn it on and make sure that it shows up in the BIOS. While it's booting up, go into the BIOS. End up going to systems. Yep, 6700T.